Hey folks, Dave from Nerdarchy, for nerds, by nerds, and today I've got Senda with me from She's a Super Geek podcast. Did I say that right? All right, because I got a lot of things floating around in my head. Also, the Panda's gaming.
Panda's talking games.
That's it. Panda's talking game. If I don't have, I'm sorry if I don't have things right in front of me. I'm terrible.
Oh no. Oh my gosh. Sorry, I've got multiple audio feeds.
Oh no. Oh, you probably have the stream on. But it's only in your ears right now, so
good. Sorry.
It's all right. It happens. Also, you've also written your own RPG, Love and Justice. I believe that was your first one.
It is my first one. Yes.
Nice. And you've also been a part of Winning an Any, which is cool because it's hanging. The medal's hanging behind you. We were just talking about that, which is a big deal as nerds. We don't often get chances to win a lot of medals. So
it's true.
Yeah. Most nerds do not sports, so
yes, and it is not medals. It is not sports medals, so yeah, it makes sense.
Although we do get like esports now, so I guess there's going to be a lot more trophies and medals for our peoples.
Yeah, I still don't think I would win medals for that.
Me neither. I have an aversion to video games. It's not that I don't like them; it's that I was like I don't want to lose the rest of my life to them. They just suck the soul out of me.
Yes. I just play Zelda, but I'm not even caught up on that, so I don't know.
So, 2 podcasts. It's pretty busy, and writing for Gnome Stew as well.
Uh-huh.
And I've actually done a lot of commenting over on Gnome Stew, just because as someone who writes on a website themselves, well, used to, I'd just like to stay up to date on what's going on with other sites. And Gnome Stew was always a great place to go because there was always content over there, and there's so much of it.
Yeah, it's a big one, and it's constant. So the head gnome is John Arcadian. He brought on a bunch of new gnomes a couple of years ago. So I'm like one of the fresh meat, right? Like kind of noobs, I guess, but it's been a couple of years. So like not really noobs anymore. So and the goal was that everybody could just like slow down a little bit and write like an article a month.
Yeah.
Instead of like everybody being like, I must turn out an article every week. So I've been part of like the really chill, like, I don't know, I turn out like an article every month and then like lean back and go, all right, what shall I talk about next month? Like
gives you time to think about it, recharge. So
yeah, exactly.
I think the way it works is you're a noob until somebody comes in after you.
Yeah, no, there's people after me now. Yeah.
You're not a noob anymore.
I'm not.
The last person in is the noob.
Yeah, now it's the latest crop is Wendell and Rachel and Kira McGran, who are also both fantastic people.
In most of the jobs that I've had, that would be the FNG. So
FNJ.
FNG. So you can ponder that. But
okay.
So what do you usually write about over there? What are your favorite topics?
So there's a trick that I learned from one of my co-hosts, Phil Vecchione, which is that every time you play a game, you're really getting your next topic for Gnome Stew. So the answer is whatever I haven't written about that kind of comes up at the game table for me. So let's see, the last article that I wrote, and I did it as a series with some of the other gals actually on the stew. We did a series of letters to our past selves, which was really cool. It basically was a series that was inspired by, there's always lots of crazy on the internet, right? And there were a couple of particular instances where we got like, we heard about a gal who was getting, really bullied at school and stuff about playing games and being a nerd and all of this kind of thing. And between that and some of the other stuff that was going on the internet, I was like, you guys, there's like things that people need to hear that we needed to hear when we were that age too, right? Like, about like making a space and being welcome in these spaces, and like hearing that encouragement and seeing people who have been here. Like we should write about that. So we did a series of letters. I did a series of letters to our past selves, and kind of split them up so that they were a little bit more specific, so we didn't all write kind of the same thing. But it was a really, I'm really proud of that series. I'm really proud of everybody who wrote with me on it. I wrote one basically about imposter syndrome and the kind of constant struggle to overcome that, and not feel like, you know, you're not good enough or not allowed to be involved in the spaces you want to be involved in. Yeah, so that was the last inspiration. That was a little bit different. Most of the time it's something like I sit down at the gaming table and like I know my next article, spoilers, sneak preview. I sat down and I was at Breakout Con in Toronto, and I played a game called Red Carnations on a Black Grave, which was seriously fantastic. And when it kickstarts or comes out, or however Catherine's going to do it, like, I can't recommend it enough. If you like feelsy games, it was super, super good. But you know, it's a game that you go into knowing that like all of your characters are going to die. And then the next game that I played after that was actually 10 Candles, which is another game that you go into knowing that your characters are going to die, right? And I had a really interesting experience actually just comparing those two directly to each other. And it called out some specific things for what I'm looking for as a player right now, just me personally, because I can't speak for what anybody else wants out of their games, of course. And so I think I'm basically going to be writing something about how relationships and emotional attachment are kind of the thing that I'm really getting out of exploring games and empathy and that kind of thing right now. So that's my spoilers sneak preview for my next article. And then if it doesn't come out being that, well, I'm sorry, it still started there. I wrote a tweet storm about it right after it happened. And then I was like, well, I should just write this as an article. Like, why am I doing this in tweets? Like, that's silly.
You're just going to have to copy and paste all your tweets into the article.
Much. Pretty much like that. Or just, I'm just going to expound on it because I'll have more space.
Yeah. Well, you know, also too, just from like a writing standpoint on a website, if you grab the tweet embeds, they make kind of not cool like bullet points and breaks,
call out kind of stuff. Yeah.
Well, you know, because I've seen some people that are really good writers and would write great articles, and it would just be like a wall of text. I'm like, oh my god, this is so ugly. This makes me want to gouge my eyes out with a spoon. I don't want to look at this. I'm like, oh, white space, please. At least images,
anything,
something.
A gap. Yes.
Yeah. Bullet points.
Yeah, it's something I try really hard actually to make sure that there's at least one set of like bullet points in all my articles, and then there's always like call outs and stuff. Like, it's one of those like paste over the text, and then like I spend at least half an hour to an hour on all of the articles, like making sure I have the right picture because I spend way too much time looking for the picture, and then trying to make sure that it's not a wall of text.
Yeah, like. So I'm a terrible technical writer, but what I have learned is like when I do write, then I'll go and look at the preview page and just see the layout and how it looks, and writing on the web is a lot different than, you know, when you write other places, because the way a paragraph looks on the web doesn't look the same. Like, your paragraphs need to be shorter unless you do want a wall of text and without white space. Like, to me the trick was trying to like pull your reader through it, and, you know, having them read, you know, 500, 1,000, 5,000 words, whatever it is, without them realizing they're reading that much, you know, just because of the scroll feature of a website.
Yes.
So.
That the thing that I've been learning that's actually the hardest part for me is like not only splitting up the paragraphs, but basically having like subtitles within like basically the division of like chunks of an article. So like in 1,000 words, I'll have, you know, 2 or 3 kind of, you know, headers in there. And so like naming those, like putting a title on some of my paragraphs, you wouldn't think that would be hard, but coming up with what to call those is actually sometimes the hardest part for me.
Well, it's also really good SEO to use the different headers and use different size headers and. Mm-hmm. And like that was part of like my background when I, you know, came into this and started Nerdarchy. Like, I've always been into RPGs, but I've also kind of been an entrepreneur and done a bunch of different things online. So like I brought that skill set kind of forward with me into this, and, you know, that's one of the things that's really helped us to grow. But I digress. Let's go on to actual plays. You like to play a lot of different role-playing games.
I do. I've coined a term for it. I call it polygamorous. I play lots and lots of different things. So She's a Super Geek. Part of what that podcast is. There's two parts to it, right? Firstly, it is an actual play RPG that highlights women as GMs. So there's always someone who identifies as a woman running the game, right? And then beyond that, we do one-shots of all our games. So the longest that we played that game for was 4 hours. And then we release them in 1 hour chunks. So they're like usually 2 or 3 episodes after I edit the heck out of them to make them, nice and concise and stuff. But yeah, so I play lots and lots of games. And fortunately, I'm at a point with that podcast where I have just enough word of mouth that now I can get other people to run the games for me, which is really fantastic. Because I used to have to learn all the rules and run them. And now I go, oh, you wrote a game? That's awesome. Will you come on my show and run it for me?
That is awesome. Like one of the things we would do is like, my partner Ted will run a game once a month. I'll run a game once a month. And then we would have someone else that used to come on and run something that wasn't D&D for us. And all we had to do is figure out just enough to make a character. Yep. And and we'd run short arcs with those games, and it was nice because it gave us a chance to play different games, and we do like playing other games, but we do not like like reading and learning new games. I have to confess,
it's a lot of work. It's the end result is that, and you can see it in Love and Justice, is that that is a 3-page game that you can sit down and just play. Like you can all read the rules together while you do it because it's based on lasers and feelings. So the games that I fall in love with right now are the ones that I can just like read in 10 minutes and be like, all right, let's go. Like, bring it. Let's play for 2 hours.
Life is short. It's too short to be learning rules instead of playing the game.
Yeah, I really agree. It's so it's interesting. It's actually the next one shot that we're going to be releasing on SassGeek is Familiars of Terra, which is on Kickstarter right now. And the really cool thing that having a podcast, the opportunity it has afforded me is getting to have people on to play their games. Before they're necessarily out in the world yet. So it's like these sneak previews by the designers of like how that game works, which is extra exciting.
Last time I checked, they were like $100, couple $100 away from kicking. They're super close. I believe we had Liz on.
Yeah, Liz Gepredical.
Oh, good. I'm like, hopefully I'm saying the right name. This is number 252 for us, so we've had a lot of people on over that course. I'm like, I'm just happy when I get the name right of the person in front of me at the time.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And also, her last name took me some practice. And that was the second time she'd been on my show, so I was like, I got it. I can say it. Right?
So we have a question in the chat. V. Dragon. Have you tried the Cortex system? It's really fun for people who like to create their own worlds.
I have played the tiniest bit of Cortex at a convention game once, because it was Firefly. I haven't sat down with it because it still requires like enough reading that I haven't really. I have a shelf of books over here that still also includes a number of other RPGs that I also still haven't read and run.
Is that Hickman and Weiss, or did they just use the Cortex system?
I think it's all Margaret Weiss Productions.
Okay, yeah.
I want to say, if I remember correctly, but they can correct us in the chat room if I got that wrong, right?
Someone will, don't worry. It's the internet.
They'll remember.
Actually, we usually get a pretty good group here, so they're fairly
I can see them typing, but I've given up on trying to read and like hold a conversation with you at the same time.
Yeah, that part gets a little tricky. If you ever see me like wandering or looking off, I'm probably looking at the chat.
No, that's very fair.
So, what is one of your favorite actual plays to play so far, or run?
Oh gosh, So there's a number of them that I'm really proud of. I think in terms of like that came out really well for the podcast and were also super fun to play. We played Soft with the fantastic gentleman from the RPG Academy. And that is a game in which you play cultists from a, Cthulian with the serial numbers scraped off cult. And you're working to, resurrect the god Soft, like to bring him back to Earth. And basically it's a super light diceless game, but you you have to work with a lot of pieces of like your cultists slowly go mad the closer and closer that they get to bringing this god back to the planet. So you have to like start slipping like these words into your language, like accidentally saying things and stuff like that. It's very, very cool. And our playthrough of it was both very dark, because of course it is, and also like absolutely hilarious because it was set in like a small town in the 1980s. And we're like teachers at a school, and we're like, but you have to go through a series of rituals to resurrect the dead god, right? And then a little bit more recently, and I'm sure there's more that I'm not thinking of, but a little bit more recently, I actually got the opportunity to record Alex Roberts' Starcrossed, which is also on Kickstarter like right now. It went up yesterday, and she's publishing it through Bully Public Games. So I got the opportunity to play Starcrossed at Metatopia last November, and then I recorded it, and I had to sit on it and wait to release it. And then she was like, you can release it in January. And I was like, okay. So I sat on it for like 2 months, and it is this, it was so awesome to play, because it's a Jenga tower like Dread, but it's a 2-person game, and you're basically, you're playing 2 people who really, really like are desperately in love with each other, but there's some reason that they absolutely cannot be together. Right? Like they can't, they really, really shouldn't, but they really, really want to, right? So you're basically playing, it has the same kind of tension as Dread as the tower gets taller and taller, but the tension is very much like a romantic relationship tension. Like, oh my God, is he going to touch her? Like, like that kind of tension, which you wouldn't think would be like as engaging, but it's so amazing. But of course it's also directly up my alley in terms of the kind of game I like to play right now. But so you play this game, and you have to do things like, if you're going to talk to each other, you have to touch the tower. So you're like touching this wobbly tower and trying to have a dialogue, and going like, ah! And it totally has that weird new relationship. Will they, won't they? Does he like me thing going on? It was a fantastic game to play. It was really, really cool. And then of course, when the tower falls, you act on your feelings, even though you shouldn't. Right. And then you have to talk about the consequences of like how everything goes wrong because you did. Yeah. So that game, that was very cool. I'm super excited about it. I went, and like the first hour is live, I was like, back. That one.
Sounds like it's part RPG, part social experiment.
It pretty much is, yes. Like it really is. You get to construct these 2 characters like in whatever setting you want and in whatever way you want. So I played it with Phil because I was at Metatopia with Phil, and we were like a software engineer and the AI he had written in a cyberpunk world.
Uh-huh.
And so it was like there was so much like taboo around it, and like the AI was also supposed to run the emergency response systems for the entire city. So like if you mess it up, then there wouldn't be an emergency response system for the sprawl. Like there was big stakes. It was good. It was a really good game.
That one would be tough for me. At an early age, I had my my emotions surgically removed. So
right. Yeah. No, it's okay. I know it's something that I definitely acknowledge. Like, I am definitely now a super feelsy player. Like, I kind of play for the bleed to a certain extent. And I definitely know that is not what everyone is doing this for. And like, that is okay. Like, well, I am okay with that.
That's the great thing about the hobby. There's a ton of ways to play it, and there's a ton of reasons to play it. You know, the only thing that really matters is can you find a group that gels with your way of playing it?
Oh, yeah.
And you're good to go.
Yep. Like, are you having fun? And is everybody comfortable and, like, emotionally safe? And as long as the answer to those questions is yes, like, do it. Thumbs up. Tea
time with Toby. Have you heard of an RPG, Everyone is John? The theme is a bit rough, but some rewriting, I think it could be the more socially acceptable.
Right. I've actually run that game. I ran it. I didn't record it, but I ran it as let's see. It was right when Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was first on, and I ran it as you were an agent. You were an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. who had just been brought back, like Agent Coulson, right? Like so. But not one of the ones who was sane afterwards.
Oh.
So that was my, like, you're in like a S.H.I.E.L.D. base and then you're flipping through these multiple personalities, like trying to figure out what's going on. It was pretty fun.
Did you just basically combine S.H.I.E.L.D. with Pet Sematary?
Maybe.
Oh, that's crazy.
Oops, don't bump the mic. That makes terrible noises. I'm sorry.
You
don't edit this out. It's live. Oh no.
We're doing it live. Yep. All the blemishes, bumps, bruises.
I'm not used to live. I fix all of that stuff in post.
Well, you know, it's a little bit newer for us. I guess I'm somewhere around, like, you know, my 1 year anniversary for doing this. So, and that's when I decided to go full time, I'm like, what am I gonna do with all my time? And I think D&D Beyond launched something, and I talked to the other guys. I'm like, hey, you guys want to talk about that on a live stream? And then I was like, oh, I could do this every day, but I was like, I don't want to just talk by myself, so I need to sucker other people into talking with me.
Always. Oh my gosh, I see a fantastic gentleman named Rob who listens to my podcast telling me Panda rules, and I have to put my hands on my head because I bumped the mic. That's how it works. You bump the mic, put your hands on your head.
So how long do they have to stay on your head for?
Until you stop bumping the mic.
Well, if they're on your head, technically you can't.
You can't bump the mic, right? Yeah, that's how it works.
that would make sense. So speaking of Panda rules, Panda's Talking Games, what's that all about?
Yeah, so Panda's Talking Games, it's kind of like my little fun show because it's kind of smaller because it's harder to make a big splash with games where you talk about GMing stuff, but I think it's great. That was the worst introduction to it ever. Let me try that again. So it's basically a 201 GMing show where we usually talk about things from the perspective of running like a one-shot versus a campaign. So how you would use tools differently, you know, to make something fit in that short space versus when you have the time to expand it and work out from there. And also lots of outtakes because I edit.
Well, you know what? That's actually super useful because I feel like in this day and age, there is a lot of one-shots going on, which that's not even like that until I came online. I wouldn't say that wasn't even a term I was familiar with.
Right.
And, you know, a lot of people are running games at conventions and things like that. So, you know, or in your local game store. Again, another thing that wasn't around when I started playing the hobby. So yeah, so that is super useful and fills a need. Like we've done, you know, one-off videos on that from time to time. So what are some of your top pieces of advice for running one-shots?
Well, so the basic it's interesting. Firstly, like we've basically been running this show since I don't know, like episode 4 on listener questions, right? Like we don't come up with our own topics. We just source the audience and then we talk about like whatever they're wondering about in terms of one-shots and campaigns. But really when it comes right down to it, the key difference is essentially time management, right? I mean, I know that doesn't surprise anyone, right, at all. Like the key thing for a one-shot is always time management and then the simplification that's required to make something fit into that specific time range. And it's part of being polygamers and it's part of being like a parent and like super busy and doing way too many podcasts and all that kind of stuff. But I have ended up with a fascination on just with like how short can a game be and still be a fulfilling gaming experience? Like, can I do it in an hour? Can I do it in half an hour? Like, can I do it in 5 minutes? So I do like a lot of one shots. And so it is all about like time management and then the specific distillation to get from that amount of time that you have to get still hit like the high points of things that will give us the game feels, right? Like the things that make us feel like we played a game and we did a thing, and like whatever we accomplished from that. So that's mostly it. And I talk about one shots on that show, and then Phil talks about campaigns because he is like one of the few people in the world I'm convinced who has actually like run a campaign and like finished it. Like he regularly actually gets to the end of his campaigns and like ends them. Like
yeah, I don't even know what that is. We are getting close. We were getting close to like doing that for the first time ever, and like some form or incarnation, the group that kind of became Nerdarchy has been around for like 20 years, and we've never done that. The running joke from my buddy Mark was like, if you wanted to get the 14th level in D&D, you had to start at 12th. So
that's been my experience personally. So yes,
I think that the biggest thing with time management and running games is like I feel like there's always one person at the table that doesn't understand that, and it's usually the GM. Like, like you're like, oh, how long does it take? It's definitely an art, to take some time, and then you also have to like know like how it's going as far as like what do I have to cut to make this come to a conclusion.
Yep, and then there's a whole toolbox of tools for like, oh gosh, I messed up my time management, and now somehow I have to wrap this up before the next person gets to this table in 15 minutes, which, is also a skill, like to not just be like, well, we're in the middle of the fight with the big bad, but see you guys later, bye! Like, that kind of stuff, where you get into just sort of like talking through epilogues and stuff is necessary if you have to, but hopefully you can manage it so that you never have to, right?
Do you know how many games you've played on your podcast?
Not off the top of my head. She's a Super Geek, like a lot.
That would actually be. I know it'd be a ton of work, but that would be a cool index to have if people are looking for like maybe a specific game that's not mainstream that they can be like, oh, I can see this played.
Right. No, and I think it is really, really useful for that. I mean, it's a lot of my focus recently has been on games that are like coming out on Kickstarter and stuff, because if I think it's a cool game and I want it to succeed, like one of the best ways that I can help that along is by helping people see like how it plays, right? Because sometimes it's hard to tell from the Kickstarter page, like, how does this actually work? How does it go? Or like, am I going to like these mechanics? Are they going to not work for me? Is it too light for me? Is it too crunchy for me? Is it too feelsy for me? All that kind of stuff. So when you get the opportunity to kind of experience someone else's playthrough of it, I think it's a super useful tool. I can do some quick math in my head. So I know that we have like, what do we got? Like 78 episodes-ish. And if I average that they're all, I don't know, 3 episodes long-ish. That's not quite right. I'm going to say it's probably about 27 different games-ish. Round it to 30 because I know some of them were just one session and there were some other ones I released on continuous weeks. So
It's still a lot of games.
How long
have you been running the podcast? So what is that? Just over a year?
Well, so that one only releases bi-weekly. So it only has about 22 episodes a year. So that one we're pushing really close on 3 years actually with She's a Super Geek.
Oh, nice.
Been going for a while. Yeah, thanks.
It's as a fellow creator, it's really hard to keep anything going that long.
Yes, indeed. And I am, I should say, like, I am extremely lucky. And this was part of the reason that the show has worked out really well. My co-host Emily and I, like, when we were starting, we had to run things. We would swap it back and forth so that we weren't like continuously overworking each other. And now that I edit Panda's Talking Games, she does a vast majority of the editing for She's a Super Geek, so that I'm not trying to edit 2 podcasts in a week, which is very good. because I would probably fall over and die. Yeah.
Do not do that. Stitch the Alchemist wants to know, is there a game you wish you could play regularly that you don't get to normally?
Oh gosh. I don't know if there's a very specific game. I'm really lucky in that in the last 6 months I've hooked up with a local crew here in Colorado to actually be able to do in-person gaming again. I didn't have an in-person gaming group for the longest time, and it sucked. Like a regular one, right? Like I have game friends here, but like I didn't have a group for a while. And a lot of that is because like adulting and timing and parenting and all of that stuff. But, you know, life happens. So I finally have a group again, and we play every other Wednesday. So I'm playing tonight, which is thrilling. And we're all GMs. So we've been just passing it around and playing little short arcs of like whatever catches our interest. And it's been seriously fantastic because I'm getting to play longer than one shots, right? But I'm getting to play all kinds of different games, and they've all been really wonderful. I wish that I were regularly playing some more of the Powered by the Apocalypse games. That's kind of if I had to pick like one engine that I like to play in campaign play right now, it's that one. I would really like to be playing like Masks, and I would really like to play like Monster of the Week and some of those games. I'm really excited about Brandon Leon Gambetta's Pasión de las Pasiones, which is a telenovela Powered by the Apocalypse game that's fantastic. It has the most, literally, hands down, I think for me at least, and it's not like I've played every Powered by the Apocalypse game out there by a long shot, but the best PBTA move that I've ever run across, which is it's telenovelas, right? It's like it's Spanish soap operas, and they're, you know, overly dramatic, and everyone is always lying, and there's, you know, the evil twin, and damn it, I hit it again. It's gonna sit on my hands. And so it's like it's always constantly all of that like over the top drama happening, but everyone is lying all the time. So there's a move, like there's no move in that book for lying to someone. You don't make a move to see if you succeed at lying. At any point in time, someone can make the move to accuse you of lying. And if they succeed, then they're right and you were lying, which is amazing. Like, and then you make the story work from there and you go. And it's brilliant. And every time it's come up at the table when I've run that game has been fantastic, because it just takes the stories going along like do, and it's just like like go off this way. It's wonderful. So I guess I would say I would love to be playing a regular Powered by the Apocalypse game again. I was for a while, my off Wednesdays, I was in a playtest group for Phil's Hydro Hacker Operatives game, which is a really cool game that I am helping him develop about like it's hydropunk. So it's like cyberpunk, but the idea is that there's no drinkable water left on the planet. And so it's like, how do we function as a society as we're trying to basically still have water? And what that does to like the classes of folks and how it really separates everything out. And then like basically in a very cyberpunk way, like melds the government with corporations and all of that kind of stuff. So that's a cool game too, but we're not playing that right now either. Sad face.
Tea Time with Toby wants to know, have you tried the Wushu system? We're getting a lot of questions like that because you've played so many. Because
I play
games.
Many systems, but
yeah.
I have not played every system by a long shot. And also, interestingly, I think because a lot of the games that I play are like so small book, I haven't played a lot of the ones that are sort of the bigger names that people usually branch out to from Dungeons and Dragons. Or if I've played them, I've played like a little one shot, right? Like that I played like one Cortex one shot, and I've played I have the new Fantasy Flight Star Wars books on my shelf, and I played one shot at Gen Con, right? Like that kind of thing. And I'm like, well, so I haven't played Wushu, no, but I've heard about it.
And then also to Tea Time with Toby wants to know Tales from the Wood by Simon.
Tales from the Wood.
And I don't know who Simon is, so.
No. I don't actually know that one. Woodland creatures who are non-anthro. I don't know, but it sounds great. The last game that I finished up with my Wednesday night crew was actually Tales from the Loop, which was a fantastic group. Like, that's an awesome game. Everybody should play that one too.
Yeah, Tales from the Loop, kids on bikes. They're like, that's a whole thing now.
It's great.
Since Stranger Things has come out, it's like Stranger Things has created like its own genre now for RPGs.
It really has. I think it's because they showed like they had just enough RPG stuff in it that like it captured everybody's imaginations, really.
Well, it's kind of a throwback too to kind of a genre that was never really named, that took place in the 80s. You know, and now people are realizing that the 80s was the pinnacle of human civilization. They're trying to recapture a little bit of that, but it's gone.
It's okay. I was not quite, what am I looking for, cognizant of the world yet for a vast majority of the 80s. So I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, parachute pants and
right.
Cocaine, that like defined the 80s, I think. So. James Leslie wants to know, having explored so many RPGs, have you come across one other than D&D 5e? Would you use it as an introduction or a gateway game to bring players and GMs to the table? I will say D&D is actually a horrible game to bring people into the hobby with. It's just got brand recognition and more people play it.
Yeah, it's actually really funny because my son, because he has brand recognition for Dungeons and Dragons, right? His birthday party, which was this last weekend, he's like, "Mom, you got to run D&D," and he just turned 10, and now he's like going to school and like running it for his friends. But I can't really say he's running D&D, right? Because like I literally printed off the simplified version of the combat rules and like handed them to him, and he sort of knows how skills work because I ran it. So I actually agree that D&D is kind of a terrible introduction, because with D&D there's a certain amount of, you either have to do a lot of explaining at the table, or you like walk up to someone and you drop a 300-page 8.5 by 11 book, like textbook, on them on the table in front of them, and then you go, "Here, just read this." Like that's awful. Okay, firstly, I have to say the thing, right? Because I've done it. I actually have a whole episode of Panda's Talking Games where we specifically talked about our favorite games to use to introduce people to RPGs. And it does depend a lot on who the person is and like what they're into and, you know, how old are they? Like, is it your kid? Is it, you know, a friend who's really into sci-fi? You know, like that kind of stuff will have a lot to do with it, because I think the key is finding something that they're going to be interested in first off. And then from there, if they're interested in it, then it's a lot easier to get them involved in actually playing. I do like I've done some intros for people with like All Out of Bubblegum, which is like really easy. I mean, it's got, I think, several more sentences than Everyone is John. It's about 5 sentences. You know, that's the game. And the particular scenario that I usually run with All Out of Bubblegum is it's a Hitchhiker's Guide merged with the real world. So it's a play yourself game, right? So what that means is I can sit a bunch of people down who have never played an RPG before. There is 0 character creation. We're not talking about anything like that at all. Your character sheet is, who are you? Like, what could you actually do in real life? And that's, you know, how you determine. And that doesn't limit you from doing crazy things, because the way that All Out of Bubblegum works is you have kick-ass things that you can do, and you have normal things that you can do, and you roll to see if you can do a kick-ass thing. And basically how it works is every time when you start the game, you only got about a 20% chance of doing something crazy and kick-ass, right? So you're rolling 1d10. But every time you fail to do a normal thing, it gets harder for you to do a normal thing because you're getting angrier, and easier for you to do crazy kick-ass things until by the time, like when you actually run out of bubblegum, which is your stat, your one stat, then you can only do kick-ass things. And then you basically like that means crazy stuff, right? Like you can't be like, okay, well, I'm going to open the door. You have to describe to me how you're going to kick the door in with your awesome kung fu skills, because you can no longer do normal things, right? So it's a really good game because it starts extremely quickly. You can explain the rules to people in about 30 seconds. There's no character creation. You jump into a game and you just get people talking, and then it both encourages them to be involved in the story and to do like wild, outrageous things and to just try the weirdest things ever. So I usually end up with people doing crazy stuff to try and get onto the Vogon ship. I once had my friends build a spaceship out of a Prius and stuff they found around my kitchen. So like it gives people the sense of like the freedom that you have when you're just creating stuff, right? So I don't know, that's one recommendation. There are definitely others. I've used that one with great success previously, so just go with that.
Yeah, and like our group plays predominantly D&D, but I still can acknowledge that even 5e being the rules lightest of the editions and probably the easiest to digest, it's still not rules light. So there's a ton of rules, and generally, like, I will ask someone like, hey, what is your concept? What do you want to do? We come up with a thing, and I'll be like, here's a sheet of paper. Don't worry about that. Just tell me what you want to do. I'll tell you what to roll. And that's actually how I like to learn games as well.
Yes.
And I learn much better from just doing than I do if I were to I would just forget it all anyway after I read it. So, terrible retention.
That is exactly the thing, right?
Stitch the Alchemist has a great question. Having played so many games so frequently, do you ever get confused about which games are what, or totally confused how certain games are played?
So surprisingly, in terms of one-shots, no. And the reason not is because they all have very distinctive flavors. So especially when you get into games that are written to be one-shots, what tends to happen is people focus them in really specifically on like one thing. There's like one thing that they do and one story that they tell and one emotion that they evoke, right? And so for them, not really. Like when you sit me down and you're like, okay, we're going to play something D20, right? Like if it's somewhere in the range of like 3rd edition, 3.5, Pathfinder, 4th edition, 5th edition, like I don't know. I don't remember how sneak attack works across the board. Like if you just tell me to do something, I'm going to default to 3rd edition. And then I'm going to tell you about flanking and you're going to be like, that doesn't exist like that in 5th edition. And I'm going to be like, I don't know how to do this anymore. So I think mostly that's an addition thing for me because the other games are distinct enough that like they don't have a lot of overlapping rules stuff. Because you get into things like, if you're going to play Capers, like you're using a deck of cards. And if you're playing Dread, you're using a Jenga tower. And if I'm going to run, let me just turn my head and look at something over here. Anything powered by the apocalypse, then, I'm using 2d6. Like, they're pretty distinct both in feel and in the actual action that I'm taking to resolve something, if that makes sense.
Yeah, if you're running the new Star Wars or the Genesis
right.
game, funny shit, funny symbols on your dice.
Then I'm reading the tea leaves, right?
Yeah.
Like
it's very much like that.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny too. Like I've heard people say, I've had friends that are like, I really don't like rules heavy games that much anymore, or even bash rules heavy games for being such, but then being totally into like Star Wars, and I'm like, that is not rules light at all. That is crunch on steroids. Plus, reading the tea leaves as you put it. It's fun, but it's definitely not in that category. Also, speaking of what you're talking about earlier about like how short you can run a game, I had another friend that wanted to build an RPG system based around that. And I found that to be an interesting concept because generally, like when people ask me about a new gaming system or creating one, I'm like, why bother? There's something that probably does it already. Or I will just kind of like mix stuff together to make it do the thing I want. Because I'm always asking like, well, why do you want to do this new thing? What are you trying to get at? But now many times people are like, oh, this is why. I'm like, oh, that's a good reason. I didn't think of that. But, he's like, I want to come up with an RPG that runs like the length of time someone would sit down for a movie, because people just don't have the attention span. I'm like, well, you know what? That's interesting, because you're trying to solve a problem you perceive.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. So I actually find that Lasers and Feelings to me is a 2-hour game, right? Like, if you push that game much past 3 hours, the simplification of, or just, you know, how light the rules are, like that's a game that fits on an 8.5, 11 by 11 sheet of paper. And that is the GM stuff, that is the rules, that is creating characters, all on that piece of paper. And it runs beautifully for 2 to 2.5 hours. And then it starts to get a little old because it gets repetitive, because there isn't any development in those rules. They are what they are. And Love and Justice is a magical girl's hack of that game, with a couple of other mechanics tacked on that make it, they gamify it a tiny bit more, but they don't actually extend the amount of time very much. Love and Justice to me runs between 2 to 3 hours, right? And I wouldn't run it for longer. So I'm the weird person at conventions, booking like weird time slots, because like it's just not meant to run for that much longer. The other game that I'm really proud of that I'm working, I'm co-writing it right now with Phil, is a game called Turning Point, and it is, it's very different from Love and Justice. Love and Justice is a, yay, we're going to play an episode of a magical girls game. Like, it is like, take a random episode of Sailor Moon. This is a game that generates that, right? Like, it's kind of fantastic. But Turning Point is a collaborative dramatic decision-making engine. And basically what it is we got fascinated by the specific way that we as humans make the difficult decisions in our lives, right? Like, if I'm confronted with a huge decision, I like to think that I'm logically thinking through like pros and cons and like that kind of thing. But in actuality, what I'm really doing is like going back in my head to previous times when I've felt, you know, emotions about big decisions like this, and the emotions that I had at those times are influencing the decision that I'm making, right? So Turning Point is a game about basically playing through those flashbacks to determine what a character is going to decide for some sort of really difficult life decision. Like, do I have a kid? Or like, do I try taking this new experimental drug for this health condition that I have? Which is pretty cool. It's a very feelsy game. It's a very light game. It's a very story indie game. Like, so if that's your deal, like, hey, it's going to be awesome. And if that's not your deal, like, no problem. But that game also runs in like 2 to 3 hours, right? Like, that's not a 4-hour slot game. So it's really interesting. I was running, this actually connects also with introducing people to RPGs, sometimes at conventions, because I like to go to conventions, but like my show is like, She's a Super Geek is not an interview show, right? Like, I can't go up to people and interview them and be like, I'm putting this on my show. Like, that's not a press thing that I can do, because it's not the kind of content that I release. So instead I was running around conventions running people 5-minute RPGs. And I was using, Evil Hat has these It's Not My Fault cards, which are basically like, there's like super fast characters, right? Like, there's basically a handful of characters and they just say like Ranger, and they have like 2 stats, right? Because it's fate based. And then there's like a situation card, and then there's a card that says how it's about to get worse. And so it's just like, okay, draw a character card, draw a situation card, draw how it's about to get worse. I'm going to tell you what's happening. You're going to make one roll to resolve that situation, and then we're going to see what happens. And I was running those in 5 minutes, and people were super enjoying them. And that was also a super good way to introduce people to RPGs who hadn't played that before, because firstly, like, super low barrier to entry, right? Because you don't have to know anything. Secondly, super low time commitment, because you're not saying, come sit down at the table with me for 4 hours. You're saying, hey, do you have 5-10 minutes? Like, I'll just run this for you. And then like, that was fun. Cool. Okay, bye. Enjoy your con. Right. Yeah. So I've done that, and I've done things in the middle too. Really, I see
the problem that you probably, I can only imagine you ran into with the 5 minutes. People go, okay, can I play again? Can I play again?
Yeah. I
didn't want to run through the different options.
Yeah. No, but there's like a whole deck of cards. And I was also asking people like, what genre do you want? So it was like adjusting things. The cards are sort of fantasy based, but, you know, it's like, okay, this is steampunk, or this is whatever. And really, basically what I distilled it down to is, for a 5-minute RPG, you set up a scene that has very high stakes, right? Like super high life or death stakes. And then you ask your player, like, what is the coolest way that you could resolve this situation? And then they tell you the coolest way, and then they roll. And based on whether they succeed or fail, they either live or die, right? Like, it's like, it is just the highest, like, it's one roll for the highest stakes possible. And then you describe that end point, whether it's successful or not, in the most dramatic way possible. And you kind of get the super short jolt of like, ooh, that was a cool game, right? Like, a cool thing happened. Ooh, I did a cool thing, right? Or I died in a really epic way.
That definitely sounds like a lot of fun. Now you've kind of explained in depth like what you like to get out of an RPG.
That's true.
But do you have a specific genre you like to use to get there, or that part doesn't matter as much to you?
Really doesn't matter that much to me. I am actually a little burned out on fantasy right now, because that was like, I played, I was playing D20 stuff, fantasy stuff, Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder. I was one of those people who went to Pathfinder instead of 4th edition before I ended up running it without having read the book. So like, I don't know, I played that genre of game exclusively for probably 10 or 12 years. And then when I started branching out, I was like, wait, like, I can tell all of these other stories too, and have different, and this connects with like what I like to get out of RPGs, right? Which is a certain thing about emotional connection and experiences. And so I can get different emotional experiences out of different settings. And I feel like I've done a lot of the fantasy ones. Like, it takes a lot for me to feel like I found something new there. But when you set it in modern day, when you set it in the future, if you set it in a specific part of the past, like Red Carnations on a Black Grave is about a historical event that happened in France in the 1890s, I want to say. I don't remember. Where lots of people died. But like, that was like, you get a different type of emotional experience because you get to empathize with people in different situations, right? So I would say it doesn't usually matter that much to me. Like, there's very few genres I would say no to. Like, I'll sit down and play whatever. Like, I'm excited about Cartel, even though like I don't have any particular personal connection to like Narcos or the drug wars or anything. Like, that's not in and of itself an interesting genre to me. But the game Cartel, like, I'm really excited to play that because it's all about these weird relationships and the emotional drama that come out of putting your characters into this pressure cooker situation. Like, that's awesome. I'm so into that. Let's play it.
So, was it Strange Days, the movie where they were like downloading other people's memories and like experience them and almost getting high on them?
So this is the part where you get to find out that like I know nothing about pop culture or movies.
Yeah, I may not even be getting it right. Like, because I in my brain I think I'm like mixing together a couple of different movies, but it just makes me think of that, and I'm like, she's an emotion junkie.
I am. I'm an emotion junkie for like not my emotions. Like,
yeah, and that was the concept.
I get to feel mine all the time. Like, so let's go be someone else.
So like, there was like, in the movie they would download other people's memories, and then like, then there would be like this dark side of it where people would be basically downloading the equivalent of a snuff film, except for it really happened to somebody.
Right.
And it was set in this like dystopian future. But,
yeah.
It was something. I think that movie came out in the 80s or early 90s.
Yeah, I would not have seen it. I was born in 82. Like, I don't remember.
I get it. I'm old. I get it.
It's okay. Everybody's old, apparently, to me. That's a thing that happens frequently. Yeah, I promise I'm not creepy like that, though. Like, they're all characters in my own imagination, so I promise it's not creepy, really.
I think it's kind of cool. I like seeing what other people are into and what other people get passionate about and why they play the game, and it's definitely a different take than I've seen. So, I think it's cool. That's all.
Yeah. Well, the end result is that it has driven me into different games, right? Like that's part of what shifted me out of D20 was when I realized the parts that I was really enjoying were things that could actually be accomplished better by different systems. And then I started playing those and I was like, this is great. And then I was like, I must play all of these. And that's like not possible, right? Because we're living in a renaissance of small book RPGs right now. And there are so many coming out and there's so many cool things out there that it's not possible for any one human to actually play all of them. But I want to, and I'm giving it my best shot. Like, I will play so many games. It's good.
Yeah, Cardboard Fortress said he was thinking the same thing, and I'm a plot junkie with tactics junkie close behind for sure. And that's why, like, certain games, like, you know, the D20 ones are better for that kind of stuff, where games that are super rules light, you know, not always.
Yeah, you tend to have a better chance of getting feelsy. And what I'm seeing a lot of, and this is what's really exciting in new games to me right now, because of the kind of games that I personally like to play. Like, and it is interesting because I used to be a plot junkie. Now I'm a story junkie, and I do differentiate between those two things. And also, like, you know, folks on maps, like, was totally my jam for forever. And I think it's, you know, we all just change where we are as people and like what's feeding us and fulfilling us from gaming. So, like, do what is cool is definitely my motto. Like, everybody should play the games they want to play. But the thing that I was going to say about it, I totally lost track of in that rambling introduction. What was the question again? Wait, plot something?
Plot junkie with tactics junkie goes behind, and then we went astray from there.
Yeah, sorry, I lost it. There was
worries.
a thing I was going to say. It's gone.
It happens. It's gone into the ether.
Yes.
Brian Smith, when you set out to design a game and invoke a feeling, are there feelings you think are fading away as people play less in shared physical space?
I don't actually think so, because I actually do play quite a bit online. Every time I'm recording She's a Super Geek, that is actually, it's a game that was played on Google Hangouts, right? So I'm in the same space with folks that I'm recording with very rarely. I will say sometimes it is harder. It's harder to pick up on body languages quickly because sometimes there's delays, like there's technical stuff that can happen, right? Or because you're playing with 5 people and they got like little tiny pictures along the side, you don't necessarily catch things from people who are not the person speaking in that moment. So I definitely think there are some challenges with playing non-locally, but I don't think that they're not, you know, surmountable. So I don't think there's anything that's really, I don't think there's things that are fading away. I think there are different challenges that we encounter with playing online versus playing in person.
My experience has been like playing online makes you hyper focused on the game and everyone hyper focused on the game. So I don't really feel like you lose that aspect of it. The aspect you do lose from going online to offline is like the camaraderie of just hanging out with a group of people and creating a social event where it's more about being together and than it is maybe doing the thing sometimes. Like, as you know, just as, you know, human beings as societies, we gather and we do something when we gather, and, you know, without saying, pretty much always, you know, whether it's, you know, food and drink or hanging out of the bar doing karaoke or whatever. It just so happens that we're playing role-playing games instead of that other stuff.
Right. And I think that we could get into long histories of things, which I am probably not qualified to talk about in terms of like how we've always gathered together as a species to tell stories and like have those social moments. So I will say part of the reason I'm really thrilled to have an in-person group again that is consistent is because I was really missing it, right? Like there is an amount of social connection and support and camaraderie that you get from playing in person that you can get some of it online, and it depends on what you're playing, like who you're playing with and all that kind of stuff. But you don't get quite all of it the same way.
So they both scratch different itches is what it comes down to.
Yeah.
And I actually enjoy doing both. Now, when I play in person, we can sit down and play for 5 to 6 hours easily. But online, I wouldn't really be interested in sitting at my computer gaming that long.
Right. I keep those to pretty, really try to keep those to 4 hours because there's a thing. And then also like bio breaks are important. Like everybody get up and go to the bathroom. Like,
So we've run several different series and we've actually done 2 hour slots with them. We've done, I mean, you don't get as much done, but we still have fun doing. Like we ran Marvel Superheroes, we run a D&D game, we ran an Open Legend game. And there's probably others as well that I'm just not thinking of.
Yeah, but, I know the feeling.
yeah. But because it just seems like hyper focused on what you're doing, it seems like you get more done than you would be if you're at the table. People aren't getting up and doing things. Basically most people can sit down for 2 hours and without eating or getting up to go to the bathroom or whatever for the most part. So everyone just is like hyper focused.
Yeah, sometimes it works like that for me and sometimes it doesn't. Usually for recording stuff, like we're pretty on task because I'm like the taskmaster, like, okay guys, do we have everything figured out that we need to have figured out? Like, let's get this going.
Now, I will say too, like ongoing stories, it's much easier to do that because if you stop, it's not a big deal because you're going to pick up next week or in 2 weeks or whatever you're doing. So.
Yes.
We are right up on just past the hour mark. So, parting words, anything you want to leave people with?
I don't know. Go out and play fun games and enjoy your game life. And, I don't know, try things outside of your experience because lots of them are really fun.
Now, as always, guys, in the description, if you're on YouTube or Facebook, you can find plenty of links to check Senda out, and there's links to her author page on Gnome Stew so you can read, or if you want to listen to actual plays, there's a link for that, or if you want to hear Senda talking about one shots, there's a link for that too. So just go into the description and click some links. Also, Love and Justice is an RPG on Drive-Thru RPG. There's a link for that in the description as well. And I believe that's free. Yeah.
Yeah, so, go download it. There's nothing stopping you.
Yeah, you're not going to break the bank there.
Yeah.
So, thanks everyone for hanging out today. And Senda, thanks for coming on. I really enjoyed having you on as a guest today. And until next time, guys, stay nerdy.
Thanks.